Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. My name is Chris Douglas from Partnered Solutions and All Auto Recalls. We've got the pleasure of having the likes of Chaz Ambrose, bottom corner there. Chaz, welcome. Chaz is the Secretary of the Vehicle Recyclers Association in the UK. Thanks for joining us this morning, your time. And we've got Marc Trent, bottom right, with the glasses on there and the cool hairdo. Marc, welcome.
Thanks for that, Chris.
And thanks for joining. Of course, Chad, how are you going?
Doing well. How are you?
Excellent. Very good. And I just forgot to click something. So we're clicking now and we're actually going live because we weren't live. Chad, can you believe that? I'm going to welcome everyone again. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Chaz and Marc Trent, Chaz from the Vehicle Recyclers Association and Marc Trent from Charles Trent Ltd in Bournemouth. If you've ever had a chance to get down there, you'll recognise the lovely place of the world. I was there in winter and it was a little bit fresh, Marc. Hopefully it's getting a bit warmer now.
Yeah, I think we've got warmer temperatures than you, Chris.
Look at my background, mate. It's nice and sunny out there at the minute. Chaz, how are you going?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks, Chris. Yeah, pretty good.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so let's jump right into it. We've got people joining as we speak. We've got Facebook Live on the go at the minute as well. So those that are on Facebook, welcome. Any messages there, please feel free to send them through and we'll try and attend to those. We've got a heap of messages that actually came through prior to the call and some that Chaz has sort of put together as some of the messages that, or some of the questions that his members may want answered. So we'll try and get to those, but hopefully you guys will come up with as many questions as possible during the call. We'll also hand over to Chaz in about 5 or 6 minutes and get him to talk to us a little bit about this announcement that we've been talking about, Chaz. So looking forward to that. But if we can jump right into it, Chaz, we've been talking about certification for some time. You know, I remember meeting you all back in February 2019 when I was there at the eBay session that we had down in Richmond. And it's been, 15, 16 months now. I know we've had a couple of hiccups along the way, but we're getting close. Do you want to give us all a bit of information on that? And just for everyone's sake, I've got some polls that will be asked some questions along the way. So be aware that you might see a poll pop up. If you could answer that, that'd be great. It'll give Chaz and the team a lot of information that he can use. So tell us a little bit about certification, Chaz, and where we're at.
Oh, well, thanks, Chris. Yeah, it has been, there has been some delays. There's been some time on the go, but it's a really important project and it's only right that we've taken time to make sure we do get it right. But I mean, the whole point of certification is to build confidence in the sector and in the operators, and to make sure they are legitimate companies and work to certain given standards. Going back, I guess it must be February time, I should say, February 19.
Yep, February.
We had to start effectively a couple of glitches, and we had to rewrite basically the standard from scratch. With the help of you guys, and it's come on a long way. The standard is now version 1 is finished. That's gone out to a number of parties to review, including insurers in the UK and some vehicle recyclers. We're constantly getting feedback on that. So, and the actual standard document, including a parts grading system, is core of certification. And the point is that you have this standard, and then you have a certification awarding body that will assess a recycler against that standard to see how they comply with it. And that gives an independent, that certification body is completely independent of us and independent of the recycler. It gives transparency and confidence that the recycler really is operating to that given standard. We've got to the stage now where we've tendered about 8 or 9 companies in the UK, national companies that offer that service. The contracts have been awarded. They were awarded last month in May. As I say, the standards there. So the scheme rules have all been drawn up. We've established a technical oversight committee, which yourself, Chris, is on there, and I think Mark might be on there. I can't recall exactly, but we are pretty close to pressing the button on the whole scheme now. It's not far off. We've got some. I think at the moment we've got about 95 recyclers in the UK have already expressed an interest. We've probably got about a dozen that have been sort of integrally involved right from the word go, including Mark there. And I think Mark is certainly will be one of the first to come in on this. So I would say that in June we'll see us button and go live with it, Chris. I think there's probably a couple more exciting announcements to be made in the coming week or so. But yeah, we're about there, I think.
Excellent, excellent. Chad, I'm just going to throw over to you. You heard a number there. How many did you say were interested, Chaz?
I think he said 90
Chaz,
to
was that
95.
95?
What percentage of your membership is that's interested?
That's about half our members.
About 50
have expressed an interest already.
The number is amazing, and that's what I was talking with Chris about this morning in the office. The number of recyclers that are interested in certification in the UK blows my mind. In the US, that number was much lower as percentage-wise of our members. And so it's amazing the buy-in, the sheer number of recyclers that are desiring that certification. And so I applaud you, the UK, the entire VRA. That's impressive to hear that kind of number already. And so I'll be excited to see how many actually do follow through and get certified. And I'm sure it's going to be a very, very high number.
Mark, before I hand over to you, just letting people know that we've got the poll going on, and are you interested in the VRA certification program? So we've had 63% vote already, and we haven't had any no's yet, so that's a good thing. So, sorry, Chaz, were you going to say something there before I jumped in?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to bear in mind that a lot of our members aren't involved in the reused parts sector. They're metal recyclers and processors. So virtually everybody of our membership that was interested in parts was interested in certification. I mean, last year in October we had our biannual conference, and it was the most well attended in recent memory, and that was driven, I think, by the focus on green parts and certification. I mean, there yourself, Chris, talking. It was very, very positive, and I think we'll get in the next couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised if we get we're well into the hundreds joining the scheme.
Excellent.
I think also, Chris, there was an interest in certification from those that don't sell parts. There is a real desire to differentiate quality operators from perhaps illegitimate operators or the poor quality operators in the sector as a whole, not just in parts reuse. This particular scheme wouldn't be relevant as it stands to them, but I think there's scope to further expand it.
Sure. So, Mark, if I can hand over to you a little bit. Certification, you've been one of the leaders with regard to the discussion around certification. I remember, in fact, the first call that I had with you back in February last year, or actually might have been January, late January, talking about certification. You were quite aggressively positive about we need to do something, and I think it's the right thing. So tell us, from a Charles Trent Ltd perspective, what is so inviting to you from a certification perspective?
I think anything that brings in a more professional approach to the industry is always a positive. We've always set our bar very high in what we do and how we produce parts, how we sell parts, who we sell parts to. So I think anything for accreditation gives obviously the consumer confidence. It gives the insurers confidence, and obviously they're more or less new to this game at the moment. So I think one of the things we're talking about is the accreditation side, and I think they're very keen to see that there's something that's put on the table by a professional body. Also, certainly think for the journey through for like your online, said that also gives you a selling tool. So, like I said, auto recalls for us has been, so again, it's been welcomed. We see it as again a powerful selling tool, and also it's good for the consumer, and it gives them the confidence they're not going to buy a part that's on recall. It just saves a lot of time and hassle.
Excellent. Well, we're talking about recalls. Mark's mentioned recalls. Chaz, should we talk a little bit about recalls and what's happening there? We've been speaking a little bit about an announcement. So do we want to have a bit of a chat about that? And do you want to sort of take the chair and tell everyone on this call and whoever's watching on Facebook where we're at and what we're doing?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Chris. I mean, recall, the whole point of certification and the part grading is, as we've all agreed, is to build confidence in the product that we're selling, the consistency of approach and the quality. And the real integral part of that, of course, is making sure that the part that we sell is fit for purpose. And to do that, one of the most basic things is we need to check whether that part is subject to a recall. I mean, if a vehicle manufacturer has recognized the part as being defective, then we need to know about it and we need to stop that part being sold. So, recalls is an integral part of the certification. It's been fairly daunting, to be quite honest, early on, because there's no sort of automated system that currently exists in the UK for vehicle recyclers. And it can be very labour intensive indeed. If you're handling large volumes of vehicles, but it's not easy to find your way through it, even relatively small numbers. And I think that's why we're so pleased to have hooked up with yourself, Chris, with all auto recalls. And I'm really, really pleased to be able to say to listeners that we are going to be launching together, the VRA and all auto recalls, launching a solution for the UK market. I've seen it working. I think it's very useful. It's just what we need right now. And it's going to make attaining certification achievable for us, to be quite honest. Do you want to jump in and build on that, Chris?
Great. Yeah. Well, firstly, can I just say it's been super working with Chaz. We've been doing a heap of work in the background from a recalls perspective and what we can do with the UK market to support auto recyclers from a recalls perspective. A lot of people look at it and say, well, it's a bit hard, and it is. It's not a simple thing to do, right? So, whatever system we build needs to be a system that's bespoke to the industry requirements, right? It needs to understand how an automotive recycler works, needs to understand what happens to, a vehicle when it comes through, and how we process those vehicles, and especially in high volume type of scenarios. So we've done a lot of work with Chaz and the team there, and Chad has driven a lot of this locally here, and we're really happy and proud to be in a position where we're offering the auto recall service that we've developed over the past 2 years here in Australia to that UK market. We're in a position now where we've got, all the historic recall data uploaded into the database, and we're ready to go. So we're in a position where we can start taking recall requests, VIN lists, and we can run those through the recall system to look at the historic vehicle analysis and say, okay, of the vehicles that you've ever dismantled, which of those were recalled, what was the specific recall on that VIN, and what's the remedy, so that it helps you clean your inventory out of some of these dangerous parts. So that's where we're at with it. We're really excited about it. Working closely with Marc as well, as again a leader, helping work through process. What are some of the things that UK recyclers may need? So that's been a good opportunity to do that with Marc, and again, taking a leadership position on this has been, I think, really, really important. So we appreciate that. So I suppose, Marc, if I can hand over to you, you mentioned briefly there a little bit about recalls. How do you see potentially recalls working in your business? When I say recalls working in your business, probably a bad way to put it. How do you see Charles Trent Ltd, managing recalls better, I suppose, in the future? And how do you propose to take that and make that a positive for your business?
Well, I think, provided we can get the auto recalls through the systems and easily, I think it's just a level of infrastructure you've got to put in just to ensure that it works both ends. Obviously, if it raises an issue with a part, that we're able to notify the customer or the purchaser of that and put a fluid process in there, Chris. I think there's a lot of work that we don't know. That we don't know is available at the moment, but we know that it's been out in the States for a lot longer than us. So it's all new stuff to us. So we're learning as we go with this, Chris. It's very interesting. Like I said, we do see it as a very valuable part of our business now moving forward. And certainly over the next 18 months, when we're putting in some big infrastructure warehousing to build for the insurance reuse and obviously stocking more parts for the demand that's out there at the moment, it all just goes hand in hand at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the really important things, and Chad, you might want to jump in and talk a little bit about this around the, a potential recall that happens moving forward, sometime in the future, and how we handle that and some of the stuff we're doing here locally for some of the recyclers that we've picked up, for example, for them.
Absolutely. Historically, recyclers have always thought, let's run the VIN for a recall whenever the vehicle comes into our operation. And yes, that's good. But the truth is we warehouse product for a long time before we may sell it. And so we need to actually run that recall again at the point of sale, or proactively be notified by the agency or the company that's trying to help you with the recall. And that's exactly what we do here in Australia, is we are proactively sending emails out when a new recall occurs on a vehicle that you have in stock. So a VIN that you have in stock gets loaded into our system, and then we're constantly running new recalls against that VIN. And if it flags a new recall, we're going to make you aware of it so you can remove a component off the shelf or out of your inventory so that you do not accidentally sell a component that is recalled. And so that's a very important feature, because recalls are occurring on a daily basis. And we're not talking small recalls. We're talking hundreds of thousands of affected products in a single recall. And so that's a critical point, and we've got to stay on top of our recalls throughout the whole lifespan of that product on our shelf.
Thanks, Chad. I've got a question that's come through Q&A. Andy Latham, is the use of the recall database a mandatory part of the certification process? Chaz, should I hand that over to you?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, it is. Yes, having a recalls process in place is part of the certification scheme. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to get certification without having that in place.
Okay, so I think that was fairly straightforward there, Andy. I think importantly though, I want to make sure that there's no, if you might find another way of doing it, and if there's another solution there for you, no one's saying you have to use this system or anything like that. We'd love you to, but at the same time, no one's forcing anyone's hand behind their back to say you have to do X, Y, or Z, right? So I think that's important. I think one of the other things, Chad, there, we spoke there a little bit about what happens if there's a recall in the future. I think one of the things that a lot of automotive recyclers haven't thought through, and to a degree, it's something that's been water under the bridge, so to speak, has been what happens if I've sold a part and then I get notified of a recall on it. So these airbags, for example, from Takata or the Pajero control arms or whatever it may be, or Subaru ignition switches, these vehicles were manufactured sometimes 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We may have sold lots of these parts. And when we sold a lot of these parts, they may be out there on vehicles, VIN numbers that are not affected by the recall. So these drivers are driving around with these parts on their cars that could be dangerous. So, it's one of those things, we as automotive recyclers, I think, need to also think about, okay, what processes do I need? So Mark, from your business perspective, when you get an auto alert to say that, okay, VIN number ABC now has a recall, whatever on it, there needs to be a process in place that you check that information, say, okay, I've checked that VIN. Have I sold that particular part? Yes, I've sold that part. Who have I sold it to? and we better make contact with them to let them know of that recall. So one of the things that we do at All Auto Recalls is actually hold your hand through that. We've got templated letters that we can help send you that will help you notify the consumer so that you've done what you've needed to do, both from an obligation perspective, but also it's the right thing to do, right? So we try and help you through that process.
Well, first and foremost, it's definitely the right thing to do. I think it's the key to this is making the process as automated as possible, because obviously it's going to be, there's obviously, as you said, there's been, you know, just looking at our data, there's been 2,900 recalls on 20,000 vehicles. And obviously we've got to go now and try and work out how we're going to notify those consumers who we sold them to. We'll obviously have the record of every part we sold. That's if we sold them. But I think one of the things where we had a discussion earlier this morning, you know, things like wiring links, which we don't sell. So there'll be a lot of items there that we don't sell at all as a company or as an industry. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all works out, Chris. But like I said, I think the key to this is as much automation as possible, and the integration to systems is going to be one of the key parts. But like most companies now, we have after sales in the department, so we could either bring that into the after sales department or even the sales department. But obviously, perhaps that's not the place to put it. But certainly, from an after sales point of view, it's where we could see it integrating quite well into our business.
Yep. Here in Australia, the All Auto Recall system is fully integrated with the Pinnacle system here. And so that's we could look at that possibility.
Well, that's good because we got Pinnacle.
Yeah,
we could look at that at the right time. Certainly, what I thought we'd do is maybe flick over to this screen here and talk to some of the specific questions that or points that we need to make about recalls just while we're on this topic. So don't forget, guys, we've got a polls happening right through the session, so feel free to jump on the polls. I'll leave them open for as long as I can and keep on reviewing some of those. So why is it important? A lot of people will ask the question, so why should I do this? And one of the questions there in the poll is, do you know what your legal obligations are around recalls? And the fact is that firstly, it's dangerous to sell a safety related recall part. And basically all recall parts are safety related because they're safety recalls. It's illegal to sell a recall part, right? So that's critical. If a recall part fails, and I know, in the US, they've had a few examples of this, and I think there's still one case going in Nevada, I think, is it, Chad, where they sold a recalled airbag, in fact, and it injured someone. Long story short, we just need to think about recalled components, and we need to think of it in the context of the consumer and the fact that there is, there is a moral obligation that we have to sell a part that is safe. Let's be clear. But looking at it from a perspective of, let's say now, what are the opportunities for us to sell more parts? And Mark, chime in at any point in time if you like here. But one of the things that I see as an opportunity here is, how can I promote my business as a recall checked and passed business, right? As a user of a recall system, as a business that has a recall process if something happens in the future, as a business that is certified and therefore has a recall. How can I promote my services and my products so that I can differentiate my product and my services from anyone else that's selling the same commodity to a degree, right? So I think there's a really positive spin we can put to all this at a point in time. Mark, I'm not sure what you're thinking there with regard to whether there's any marketing opportunities here with this whole thing, or
100% there's a marketing opportunity. Like I said, just going back to the consumer confidence. If a consumer see that you've got something displayed on your website or even on your adverts or on your listings, that everything's been auto recall checked, and it gives them the confidence. I think anything that builds confidence for the consumer will always put you up to the top of the ladder, basically, and they'll always buy off of you over somebody else, regardless of price. So that's normally what we found. We've never been the cheapest in our industry anyhow. We never possessed to be the cheapest, don't want to be the cheapest. We want to charge value for the goods that we produce. They're certainly becoming more expensive in the UK now than they ever had. Obviously, we've got a lot of competition within Europe as well, from Europe, sorry. So yeah, I think anything you can add there from a marketing point of view, we'll be certainly displaying it where possible.
Okay. Chaz, I can see you nodding your head. There's something you wanted to say there. Sorry, I didn't pick up.
No, I mean, I think Mark's completely right. I completely agree with him. You know, it strengthens the brand, and you know, Mark's brand is business, and he wants to invest in it. He wants to sell more parts. He wants a reputation as a professional and good quality operator that people can be confident in the product. So I completely agree with him. Yeah.
We've got a question here from Ulrich Lucas. Ulrich, so can you share what parts are usually affected by recalls? 3 most frequent ones. Tough question. You know, you could say electronic components, suspension components, those types of components are fairly consistent. What we do find, obviously, Takata's, you know, blown it out of the water. There's about 1 million recalled vehicles a year in the UK. Okay, I think 2018 was the low, 2019 was the last time we had some numbers come through. There were 977 odd thousand vehicles in that year. And, you know, the previous 5 years before that, there was higher than that, because that's when they did a lot of the Takata recalls. So, you know, I can tell you, for example, just a week and a half ago, we had Volkswagen has issued another recall on another set of airbags, not the same Takata airbag, another set of airbags. 365,000 vehicles have been recalled there. Interestingly enough, in the US, the NHTSA, which is the National Highway, what does it stand for, Chet?
Yeah, Transportation Safety Administration.
Yep. So they I think oversee the recall databases, or the recalls that manufacturers put out. They actually excluded 56 million vehicles from that specific recall. They want to see more evidence about it, but Volkswagen has recalled 365,000. But think about what hasn't been recalled yet, and it's 56 million vehicles. So Ulrich, really hard to sort of say which are the main 3. Certainly Takata's been prominent for obvious reasons. We see a lot of control arms. We see a lot of things like you know, ignition switches, wiring. You know, there was another transmission recall not long ago that happened to be another Volkswagen Golf 2012 to 2017 or 18, Golf 7, I think it was, or 8. They had a transmission recall. So there was a whole heap of those that were recalled in that lot there.
Something to touch on, Chris, too, is a lot of these recalls actually may be assembly routing of a wiring harness was done incorrectly when the vehicle was actually manufactured. Torque specifications may not have been completely reached from certain bolts were installed. And so a lot of the recalls that we see come through the system may not necessarily be for parts. They may be for routing or torque specs or something very specific to some kind of labor that was performed on the vehicle during the assembly process.
Yep. I'm just sharing a result there for a poll that we just did. We only got 9 responses to it, but do you currently check vehicles for recalls? We had 3 yeses and 6 nos. So, you know, if that's indicative, you know, 60 to 70% of yards currently don't check for recalls. I can tell you now from the discussions I'm having with various organizations in the UK, insurance companies and so forth, the recalls piece is going to be a critical component of anything that they do moving forward. So it's something that we need to deal with if we can. Andy Latham's just popped another question up. Thanks, Andy, for these questions. I think they're really important. You've only mentioned recall parts for cars. Are you including motorcycles, heavy commercials, buses, etc. in this system? Great question. So yes, I believe we're capturing all motor vehicle related.
Yeah, we have motorcycles. We do have heavy commercial trucks also.
Yep.
They're all in the system.
Part of the challenge with some of these are the naming conventions. So, you know, Yamaha, traditionally what we've done over here in Australia is we've dealt with motor vehicles, as in cars. In the UK, we're adding motorcycles and other such products, because we know that the recyclers in the UK do sell a lot of this product and dismantle a lot of these products. So certainly they're going to be there, and we're fine-tuning some of those naming conventions that we probably didn't have in place for the Australian market. But I think that's just about already there, isn't it, Chad?
Yeah, we had some issues with Volvo, because you have Volvo cars, Volvo trucks.
Yes.
You've got Honda motorcycles, Honda cars, and so they are all tying together and all going to be available. Actually, it's probably functional at this exact moment. We just finished a patch about an hour ago in the system, so it's probably all functional right now.
Excellent. We haven't got any more questions at this very point in time. I might flick over back to the presentation and talk a little bit about how it'll work. Let me just get back out of that. I will share my screen. Bear with me. Okay, so if we just have a little bit of a look at how it'll work. So Mark mentioned earlier that we ran a heap of his VINs through the system. I've hidden this lot of VINs a little bit there for obvious reasons. We want to make sure we deal with privacy issues accordingly. But we've run about 20,000 VINs through the system. This specific recall, so this is what we call the historic inventory analysis report that we produce. We do this at the very beginning of the process, and for those that want us to do it. But basically, we map all of your VINs back to the specific recalls in the database. Every recall has a recall ID, and one of the challenges with the recall databases, both here and in the UK, one of the challenges is that they give you a VIN range, and when they give you a VIN range, not all the VINs within that range are affected. So we've been able to decode all of that so that it maps to the specific make and model, and therefore we get a one-to-one match. So basically, recall ID 3271. This was published or activated on the 16th of May 2016, and it was for the driver's airbag inflator, manufacturer reference number, etc. It's actually a Honda CR-V, 2007 model. For this particular recall, Mark had 478 vehicles that he had, what would you call it, that he had processed through his facility that were affected by this specific recall. So that's a lot of VINs affected by this recall. What does this allow Mark to do? It allows him to go through each of those VINs, and I know it's a job, but at the end of the day, we've got to get it right. So it allows him to go through each of these 478 VINs and check whether that driver's airbag has been removed and sold, removed and in inventory. Has it been crushed? What's the situation with it? And deal with each of those scenarios. If it's been crushed, great. He marks it off as it's gone to bed. No one has to worry about it. If it's in inventory, then obviously remove from inventory, delete it out of stock, document that that's been done, so there's a full traceability. If it's been sold to a customer, as I said before, we'll help Mark with some communication that he can communicate to that customer so that he or she can have it repaired by the Honda dealer. Now, really important at this stage, we need to, I know there's a heap of GDPR requirements over there. And I'm not sure where you guys are at, Mark. I'm not sure where you're positioned with regard to keeping customer records. I know when we spoke at the eBay conference back in February last year, we had a 2-day session. We did talk about that specific issue and that you're not supposed to keep customer records for a period of time, unless there's an exception to the rule, unless it means that you need to keep them for this type of a purpose, right? Because it's a safety related issue. My view on it is that it would be totally irrational not to keep customer records. In this scenario, if they bought an airbag off you 10 years ago, they're driving around with a potentially fatally, a fatal airbag in that vehicle. You need to be able to contact those customers. So I'm not sure where GDPR fits into that. I'm certainly not a lawyer and not giving advice on that front, but Chaz, I'm not sure. Have you had much to do there? What's your view on that? Is that something that we can deal with?
Sorry, was that me, Chris?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, yeah. No, GDPR is quite clear on that. There are specific cutouts. It doesn't prevent you holding customer information. It's focused around the management and the safety of that information. But it specifically says if there are other legal requirements which require you to keep that data, then it's a legitimate interest to do so. And there's a number of those, including Scrap Metal Dealers Act. So yeah, keeping customer information is certainly not a problem under GDPR. Transmitting it, obviously.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. So, Mark, any comments on this screen? The only reason I mentioned it being yours because you mentioned it before, so I thought I'd just.
Yeah, I understand that. Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Chris, one question that viewers may have, we've talked about recalls, but I'm aware that we haven't really put it into any context. And looking at that figure of 478 vehicles, that's a lot of what we're assuming are active recalls. Have you got any kind of data on how many? The presumption for many people would be that by the time a vehicle's got to end of life, it's the recall's being satisfied and repairs. Have you got any kind of data that would throw light on that?
You know what? I'm going to launch a poll because before I give you that, I want to get other people's ideas on what they think it is. So, guys, on a serious note, I'm not trying to be funny about it. But on a serious note, I'm going to stop sharing this for a second. If I can launch that poll, excuse me a moment. I'm going to launch that poll. If everyone can respond to this and really give us their ideas of what they think it is as a percentage of all of the vehicles you have processed in the past, how many do you feel would be affected by a recall? Not just airbags, any type of recall that you need to deal with. So have a go at that, guys, while we're talking. First one's come through there. Whoa, interesting. Okay, and while we're talking, we'll get those all through. They're flying through at the minute, so it's good and very evenly spread, I have to say. So let's just continue here. Sorry, I'm moving between screens, guys, so apologies for a little bit of incoherence. Let's share screen.
So I do just have one question on that last screen we were showing, and if it looks up the VIN numbers, does it actually identify if you've removed that part or not through the systems?
No, we don't have that level of granularity between us and your yard management system, Mark. Potentially.
So you'd have to run the vehicle stock numbers and see what you remove from them.
Yes, at this stage, yes. Chad, I know you've done a little bit of work with some of the recyclers here in Australia using
there is another option. We could pull a report. We could pull a report out of your system that's a couple of things. I think you call it a shakedown report. It tells you what you have in stock. I can compare the shakedown report to the list of active recalls and then give you a report back that I could just run the query for you, match the records up, send a list back to you of everything you have in stock that is affected. That takes me about 24 hours to turn that around and get it back to you. Another option is to run another report on some of your historical sales records, and then I could query that against the recalls also, and then tell you what you have sold that has actually been recalled. And so we definitely can do that manually, and I can do that on my end. It's a little bit time consuming, but it is definitely doable, and it's something that somebody with a little familiarity with Microsoft Access could do at your facility also.
Yeah. We have someone on that. So okay, understood.
Yep. Okay, so let's quickly go to the next slide. And if in the case where you don't have integration, obviously you can use the web interface on the All Auto Recall system to do a VIN check. And looking at one of the VINs that was affected, basically I just did a screenshot of it before. So this specific VIN was for a Honda CR-V 2007. As you can see just below here, you've got 2 found, which means that there were 2 recalls found on that specific vehicle. You've got the specific description of the issue: passenger side airbag may fail to deploy, etc. And then underneath that, you got the second one, driver's airbag. So there were 2 recalls. The first one was published on the 8th of the 8th, 2016. It's the passenger side airbag. That's when the recall was activated. The second one was activated on the 16th of the 5th, 2016. So if you're looking at recalls, if it's not integrated with your yard management system and you type that information in there and it gives you that return, you'll see all of that information there for you so that you can deal with a specific part on the vehicle that's just coming to your yard. If it's integrated, for example, integrated with Pinnacle, the way it is here in Australia, what it'll do is it'll bring this information up. It'll look slightly differently or slightly different, but it'll bring this information up within your Pinnacle system so that you can see it there and then. And it'll store this information, date and time stamped within Pinnacle and the user who saw it, etc. So certainly if you're a DH user, again, the API is there. You'll be able to use that API to interface with DH as well very, very easily. But again, the information is there. It allows you to deal with that at that point in time. Any questions on that? Mark, probably more so from a user perspective from you. Any questions on that screen there?
No, it's pretty straightforward.
Yep. Okay.
Chris, when you're inputting that data on your web portal, how much information would a user have to type in? Is it just the VIN, or do they have to enter other information?
They have to enter the VIN, make, model, year. And the reason they need to do that is because of the VIN ranges. We need that information to then basically reverse engineer and decode those VIN ranges to the specific recall and the specific VIN. Otherwise, you get crazy sort of responses. So this enables us to go one-to-one. So we can get an exact match by doing it that way. It's just the way the manufacturers produce and share that information with us. So that's what we've.
And again, Chaz, just to touch base, this can be done. The initial onset can be done by a simple V4 report out of the Pinnacle system, and then you send that to us, and then we run it through the system in a batch bulk upload, and the report comes back out in an Excel format like this.
So the poll, interesting. It's pretty even, isn't it? 14 to 21%. The 20,000 odd VINs that we've run in the UK market at the minute for Mark, we've got a number more to do, so we're certainly not at the end of that, but 20,000 VINs gives you a decent sample size, are running very close to 15%. So those in the middle there, 11 to 15%, you're the winners. 21%, so yeah, you're close. So look, I think everyone understands that there's a fair chunk out there, right? It's not like 90% of your inventory, but 15% of your inventory potentially is affected by a recall. You need to deal with them. So think about it also from a perspective of an insurer. So, Mark, one of the things we discussed before was, excuse me, promoting our services, our products to insurers. If an insurer doesn't have a level of confidence that the part that they're buying to authorize to be put on a claim hasn't been checked, it's questionable to a degree. More importantly, what happens if something happens in the future? How do we know that that part hasn't been recalled at any point in time in the future? And what do we do about that? Especially now that we're moving towards more and more electronic parts. Technology, for example, door mirrors with sensors and cameras and all this type of stuff. That's where we're seeing a lot of recalls happening. I know Ulrich asked the question before. That's an example. Now we're seeing a lot of those sensors and technology components, which used to be, little sensors in the bumper bar. Now they're everywhere, right? Let's face it, our vehicles got sensors all over the place. So in order for us to be able to be selling these really expensive components in the future to a big burgeoning market like that insurance market that, we've been working hard at for a long time, we're very close to now, we've got to be able to give them certain guarantees around our processes and our systems. And as I said before, you may not choose to use the All Auto Recalls VRA system. You may choose to use something else. Whatever it is, do something about recalls. I think it's something that we cannot ignore. Yeah. We've got another question here. Bill Firth. if the recall has been fixed prior to end of life, does your system exclude these vehicles or VINs? That's a really good question. So there's a grey area in the UK, and we've opted to take the path of erring on the side of caution rather than giving false negatives. And that is, vehicles, I believe, from what I understand in the UK, when they go through a particular class of total loss, they need a certificate of destruction from the recycling, the ATF. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens there apparently is that the vehicle manufacturer is able to basically cross that vehicle off the list and close that recall. So it's marked as completed. As a result, we may have removed components of that vehicle for resale, because that's what we do. We're automotive recyclers, right? We take them off the car, we put them into stock, and we sell those parts. Those parts will show up as not affected, but they're actually affected parts, because the vehicle itself that you've crushed isn't the product that's an issue. It's the component part that's come off that is actually recalled. So at this point in time, unless the manufacturers can give us a lot more certainty around that, we're in a position, and we've looked at direct feeds with the manufacturers, and even they're not giving us that live status. We'll be flagging these components as recalled so that they're dealt with, and make sure that you get them out of the system rather than leaving them out there and potentially risking selling them to a potential user. Chaz?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have it's the DVSA are the body responsible for recalls in the UK, and I've had a couple of discussions with them about it. My impression was that if the vehicle at the point of end of life has got an outstanding recall on it, a COD wouldn't affect it. I think the fact that we've been able to run recalls on vehicles that mark COD would support that. But the more the word of caution is, the more you talk to these people in technical terms, the less certain they seem to be. So yeah, you have to err on the side of caution with that.
So we've had discussions with DVSA/SMMT, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly I don't want to be sending a response to, Mark, for example, on a control arm that's worth 50 quid or whatever the case is, that says it's safe to sell. He sells and it snaps because it wasn't, it didn't go through the toughening process. It wasn't cured properly, which is one of the issues, believe it or not. And then it causes a crazy accident, right? That involves 10 cars and 15 people and all that type of stuff. For the sake of a £50 control arm, I'd rather say, let's get it out of the system and make sure we're not in trouble here, right? I think that's where we're at until someone can give us certainty around it. Then let's err on the side of caution and give everyone the comfort that, guys, there's an issue on your historic stuff, it's dealt with. Anything moving forward from this point on, as soon as we see the recall, bang, it's hit you, you get the auto alert, Mark removes that part from stock because it's live. He knows it's live. So that's where it's at the minute.
Chris, what about Mercedes? When I spoke to DVSA, they pointed out that a couple of manufacturers don't submit information to the SMMT database. And I seem to recall that Mercedes were in, there was some legal dispute about that recently. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, I believe we have Mercedes. I'm just checking now by make. Let me just have a quick look.
We did map that earlier today. That was one of the patches we had to do earlier. We do have some recall data on the Mercedes. Can you find one to share with us, Chris?
I'm just trying to get into the back end at the minute. Maybe not for this call, Chaz, but certainly we can follow that question up and see what's there or not there. Actually, here we go. Yes, Mercedes is in there. We've found, there's a heap of VINs within the system. There's some model matching that needs to happen yet, but certainly the Mercedes are in there. So we've got 1,412 separate recalls that are in our system for Mercedes alone.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so hopefully, I didn't catch the name there, but hopefully we've answered that question. As we've said, we do want to err on the side of caution rather than potentially going down the wrong path and putting people at risk. Let me just talk a little bit about how we want to work with you with regard to promotion. So, Mark, one of the things you mentioned earlier was, how do I promote the business? What do I do to really get out there? We recognize this as an area that needs to be dealt with. We want to give recyclers and manufacturers that are participating and engaging with us as much marketing sort of clout as possible. So one of the things we've done for the Australian market is, obviously we have a frame certificate that we send you. That's all good and well, but that sits in your office. That's not a big deal. One of the things we do is we have the registered user logo. A number of our members here in Australia now have that, for example, in their email signature. They're starting to list it on their eBay photos. They're starting to put it on their websites, you know, that they are recall checked or they're a participating registered user of the recall system, just to give their customers peace of mind. Obviously, one of the things that we can't check right this point in time is whether you're actually following through and dealing with the recalls in your system. So we assume you're going to do that. It's in your interest to do that, but we try and provide you with as much of that information as possible. So we'd urge you, if you became a member, to use that information and get it out there so you can actually tell your customers that when you're buying my part, you know that it's been through a recall process. The other thing we've done locally as well is our members, we've sent them, we've printed off a little, you know, postcard size, that bottom left-hand corner there, no safe, drive safe, with a blue round circle down the bottom left corner. Little double-sided flyers that we're putting, asking our members to put with their invoices. Mark, when I was at your place, you do a lot with eBay, for example, and you put your little lollies in your eBay boxes. It's a perfect sort of thing to do there. You put one of these cards in there, and then your customer, once they've bought off you, knows that, you know, they've bought from someone that's doing the right thing. And, you know, if there's any issue in the future, you're going to be talking to them. Next time they're looking at eBay, they're looking up your store rather than someone else's, right? So not that I don't want them to look up someone else's, but obviously we want to promote our members as much as possible. So they're the types of things that we've started doing here. I think there's opportunities there to do more and more of that. I'd love to be talking to some of the online platforms about how they can promote this. And again, as to your point earlier, Mark, and also Chaz, it's a way of self-regulating and making sure that we've got quality recyclers participating in a certification program, participating in a recall program, and by default, the ones that don't do the right thing are going to pop out the side. Just my view, but I think that's where it's going to end up, without having it legislated, if you like, because, you know, legislation's the funny thing. You know, sometimes it's, we don't really want it, but we get what we ask for, and it's probably not a good thing.
We can't say today confident that they won't legislate against it, though, Chris.
Say that again, Mark.
We say here today that we're confident that they might legislate in the future. So, you know, it's better be prepared.
Yeah, they well might. I mean, we don't know. So it's out of our hands to a degree, but let's be prepared. Let's be in the right spot. Let's do the right things. You know, I think everyone.
I think the pace of, I think the use of or the reuse of parts now is certainly increasing year on year, and I just think the demands and the strict rules around it will only get stricter. That's our view.
I've got no doubt. Look, we the work that I'm doing with insurers over there, there is a really, really strong push towards reclaimed parts. There's no doubt about it. We've said it before. Claims costs are increasing. Parts costs are increasing. Availability of OE parts is becoming more difficult and more time consuming. Everything's ex-Germany, ex-Japan, ex-Korea, ex-China, whatever it is. It's getting more and more difficult. And at the minute in the UK, you guys are a bit lucky, if I can use that term, lucky. Well, no, you're not lucky. The insurers are not seeing it at the minute because their claim rates are down by 70%. right? Even still, the claim rates are down significantly. So they haven't had to deal with the volume of requests for those parts that are in, in back order at the minute, because they've still got inventory. So I think it's going to be, we're going to be using more and more reclaim parts. And I think that's a great thing for the industry. The economic environment is such that it will push towards more and more recall parts. Let's face it, when we have economic hardship, longer term, people keep their cars, they don't buy new cars, they can't afford to buy new cars, they've lost their job, etc. So they're looking for a cheaper alternative. They're looking to repair their older car. And that's where I think organizations like yourself, Mark, and the people that you represent, Chaz, are going to really do well in the next 5 or 6 years. But we need to be smart about it as well. We need to start taking the next step. And I think certification, Chaz, to your credit, and what the VRA certification has done. And really looking forward to the next announcement that hopefully you'll be able to make really soon. That's going to be really, really important for the industry.
Great.
Okay, we're nearing the end. If we have no more questions, any closing comments, Chaz, before we move on?
No, I think recalls, I think certification in this country is overdue. We've been talking about green part standards for as long as I've been in the industry. I used to work closely with Mark, and we hosted many insurance company meetings going back 15 years. So I think it's come of age, and I think it's going to happen now. And we have an opportunity to really build confidence in the product we supply.
Excellent. Mark?
Yeah, like I said, just reiterate what Chaz says. I think they said the accreditation, all the tools that get, any tools that we can have to enhance the way we sell parts and how we sell parts is got to be beneficial to the ones that want to do it and want to drive their businesses forward. So, we're embracing the changes. We're welcoming. Yeah, there's obviously challenges to bringing new processes in, obviously additional costs. And we've got to factor those into the business as well. But overall, we're comfortable with it. We think it's, like I said, well overdue. Certainly, accreditation is in the UK, and certainly reuse is obviously for the insurance companies is well overdue. But we know why, how, and what's going on. So, and I think it's a brighter future for the auto recycling in the UK.
Great. I think you're right on the money there, Mark. Certainly one of the things I've been working with the UK market now for a good 15, 16 months. So progressive, really exciting. You've got some great yards there. And as I've said before to so many people, I said to Chad today in the office, I said, you know what? There's a half a dozen yards in the UK that I've been to, at least, and there's probably more, but half a dozen yards that I've been to, and they're the best in class anywhere in the world that I've seen, beyond the biggest yards in the US. And I say that with all respect, Chad. But certainly, your organisation there, Mark, should be very proud of itself and what you guys have achieved there. And I think you're leaders in the industry and you're taking that leadership position. So I think that's a really positive thing. And I really enjoy working with you guys in the UK. I think it's great. You mentioned something there, though, that I did want to touch on because I nearly forgot. And that is, there will be new costs that come into play. So one of the questions, Chaz, that you had is, what's it going to cost recyclers? So again, I've been working closely with Chaz to sort of come up with a model that's going to be cost effective. It's a bit of a scalable model so that the larger players that do higher volumes can do what they need to do with recalls without it breaking the bank. But basically, we're going to kick off. There'll be a base fee of £85 a month. And then there'll be a small transaction fee per recall. I think at the lower volume yards it'll be about 35 is a pence that you guys use there.
Yeah.
Per check, per unique check, not for every single. So you might check the same VIN number 5 times in a month, and that's okay. So that's one check, right? It's not 10 different. But yes, that's what we're kicking the model off with, and obviously we'll higher volume yards will get a volume discount, if you like, to help them through it to make it work. So that's where we're at. We've tried to, as I said, come in at a price that's going to make it feasible for everyone to use and not obtrusive. We think we're there. We're just announcing, likewise, tomorrow we'll be having an EDM go out to Australian users. We spoke, or Chad spoke to each of them today. The price locally was double that until literally today. So we've matched that with the UK model, and hopefully we'll see a growing number of users come on, because it is a critical sort of part of the market. We need to do something and make sure that we make it accessible to as many as possible. So that's a little bit about costs. Any questions, Chaz, Mark, on that?
At this point,
Chad, anything from you before we close off?
No, I want to reiterate how impressed I am with 50% of your members interested in certification. That blows my mind, and so it's something to be very proud of.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort to be on this call. I know, Mark, you've got a heap of stuff happening at the minute with your growth strategy. So thank you. I appreciate your time. Chaz, always a pleasure working with you, mate. I think it's coming along, and I see a really bright future. Chad, I'll see you in the morning. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.